Hello everyone, and welcome to every episode of The Simpsons Season 29 Reviewed. I have been working on a few other videos recently, but as promised I am back now. Last time out I had a frankly torrid time with Season 28, so any kind of improvement here would be appreciated. One thing to note about this season is that there was a 9-week gap in the middle of it, meaning that there were no episodes in February. This was due to other events happening at the time, namely the Winter Olympics. Anyway, if you're enjoying the content still, please support the channel by giving a like and a subscribe. And be sure to check out the Simpsons wiki in the description if you want to know anything about the show. With that said, let's move into Season 29, Episode 1, The Serfsons. In a magical medieval world, Marge's mother is turned into an ice walker, and the only way to cure her is to make Lisa perform illegal magic. My trivia for this one is that in Moe's, the head of Toothless, the dragon from How to Train Your Dragon, is on the wall, and my best moment was the talking trees being made into ladders. The season premiere gets a 2 out of 5. Despite being set in a fantasy land where magic is a driving force of the world, this still somehow felt stale to me. It went in a very standard direction where the Simpsons and the rest of the peasants eventually rise up against the rich nobles. The whole bit about them needing to find a cure for Marge's mother was a bit bland, especially given that it ended halfway through the episode. The only thing that can be said for it is that at least it came back in the end, where Marge's mum sacrifices herself to kill a dragon. It is rare for her to have anything to do on a show, so it was nice to see, I guess. I just could not really get into this episode as much as I would have liked to. I could also not shake the Game of Thrones vibes, which in my opinion had no reason to be a part of this. There were more bad jokes than good ones here too. Some of the clangers include Marge's twin brother and the pervy Ice Walker. The talks about the afterlife also felt a bit pointless. Like, they just brought up a few different beliefs which people have, without actually expanding on them at all or talking about them. Though I will say the gallant trees promising to help, only to get cut down into ladders, I quite liked. I was just not expecting that to happen at the time. Season 29, Episode 2, Springfield Splendor. Marge and Lisa combine to create a successful graphic novel turned Broadway show, but their egos soon start to get in the way. So this episode was actually originally supposed to be the Season 29 premiere, not the Serfsons. And my best moment here was just the animation style of the novel characters. This one gets a 3 out of 5. This was very much a 3.5 kind of episode in my view. It could have been rounded up or down, but I decided that I couldn't quite give it a 4 in the end. This episode's strength is the character interactions. They got pretty much all of them right. Marge and Lisa both got a bit high on all the adulation, but at the end of the day, they both did the right thing and recognised the other's contribution to the work, even if it destroyed the stage show in the process. I also liked how it included the comic book guy and Kumiko, with how they started selling the comics for Lisa and Marge. Marge being the artist and Lisa being the writer makes perfect sense too, given the backgrounds of those characters, and I like the animation used when showing off the novel. There were two things holding this episode back from a 4 rating though. One was that there was a few jarring things here which made no sense. One was the fans booing Marge and being so rude to her at a convention. That would just not go on in real life. And it set up the argument between her and Lisa in quite a forced way. The second was that the Bart and Homer scenes were completely unnecessary, and only succeeded at diverting my attention away from the more interesting stuff. The other big flaw was that this episode was just not that funny. If it had some real laugh-worthy moments, I would have looked the other way on some of the story issues, and still gave it a 4. Season 29, Episode 3, Whistler's Father. Homer discovers that Maggie is great at whistling, and launches her baby celebrity career. Meanwhile, Marge impresses Fat Tony with her interior design taste, and he hires her to style his brothel. So my trivia about this one, which is kind of a mistake I'm guessing, is that in one scene, 2 cribs can be seen in Maggie's room, and my best moment here was the South Park reference. I gave this one a 3 out of 5. So last episode was a very solid 3, this one not so much. It's lucky to be getting this rating really. The story, although it has some nice moments with Homer and Maggie, was kind of bland. Maggie getting famous because of her whistling felt a bit sudden, and the whole thing about child stars imploding is hardly anything new. The ending was also kind of rushed, with her getting a new tooth, which stopped her ability to whistle. Marge's subplot of being Fat Tony's interior decorator also ended up coming to nothing. We even had to put up with Helen and her friends being horrible to Marge along the way. The only bit of the story that was interesting was Homer and Marge both trying to hide their secret from each other. That is not a dynamic we see very often. What got this to a 3 was a few good jokes. As I said, I like the one about how Trey Parker seemingly does everything in South Park, but I also like the sad-faced chair, and Milhouse somehow keeping a mountain lion in his room. Season 29, Episode 4, Treehouse of Horror 28. The 3 short stories this year are The Exorcist, Coralisa, and Homer. My trivia for this one is that this is the 3rd Treehouse of Horror episode to use CGI, after Treehouse of Horror 6 and 25. And my best moment was just seeing Homer cooking himself. This year's Halloween episode gets a 3 out of 5. So the intro to this episode has some decent animation with the family as food products. However, the first segment with Maggie having this demon inside her was a little bland. I think the fact that it all took place in the Simpsons house added to that feeling because there was no real action involved. It was hard to raise the stakes when you didn't show how it affected the rest of the town. Part 2 was a step up. It was a decent parody of Coraline. Seeing the characters with these big button eyes was a bit unsettling at first, but it seemed to work for the characters themselves, so all is good I suppose. I also liked how Snowball got a bigger role in this one. The joke about her not talking to stop the dog feeling inferior was nice. So yeah, a decent parody with some good animation, not much else to say. The final part was probably a step up again. I like how it started with Lisa doing the warning. It's a nice callback to when Marge did that in the early Treehouse of Horrors. The warning was quite fitting too, as it was incredibly weird for Homer to start cannibalizing himself. I can imagine this part being quite polarizing. It somehow ended up working for me though. The main reason is that I could buy Homer being this over the top about eating, especially in a Treehouse of Horror segment. It was quite ridiculous some of the things he did, but it was all decent viewing I thought. Overall, this Halloween episode was okay. It had solid ideas, but it lacked the laughs to be a real good episode. Season 29, Episode 5, Grampy, Can Ya Hear Me? Grandpa gets a hearing aid, and finally hears what everyone has been saying about him. Meanwhile, Skinner discovers that his mother has been holding a massive secret from him. So you can see Agnes and Seymour Skinner watching Game of Thrones at the end of the episode. And my best moment was the Nobody Knows Hans Moleman skit. This episode is a 1 out of 5. The grandpa side of things did have potential. They just squandered it really. For a start, this episode was very boring, and had a fair bit of filler, the 2-minute couch gag being the worst offender. The Skinner and Lisa subplot was completely pointless, and kept tripping up the main plot. They should have got rid of that completely, as it was obvious that Skinner would forgive his mother in the end. Grandpa getting a hearing aid and hearing his family talk negatively about him should have led to some honest reflection. However, they never really committed to it. There was no real thought from the family about why being mean to Abe is wrong. They just kind of miss him a lot and all make up. It leaves me with the impression that they will continue treating him this way, which begs the question, what was the point to all this? As I said, the episode was not funny either. The ending bit with Mole Man was decent I guess, which still makes it the best thing in the episode. Season 29, Episode 6. The old blue mare ain't what she used to be, ain't what she used to be, ain't what she used to be. Had to be done. Frustrated with the local government, Marge plans to run for mayor. To win public support, she begins making Homer the butt of her jokes. My trivia for this one is that the train sheds where the monorail trains are at resemble Tidmouth sheds from the British television series Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends. And my best moment was the old monorail being turned into a walkway. This episode gets a 2 out of 5. It started out in an amusing way. I liked the idea of turning the old monorail track into a walkway overlooking the town. They managed to get a few nice jokes out of it too, like Homer and Chief Wiggum getting stuck, or the modern bin that outed Kirk Van Houten. The monorail going on a rampage again was a bit silly though. Equally as silly was Marge's decision to run for mayor. There was hardly any build up to it. Lisa kind of just suggests it to her, and the next thing you know, Marge has a whole team around her. Then, once she actually becomes mayor, nothing really happens. They attempted some political satire about the various voting groups, and how exploiting an idiot like Homer was enough to woo a lot of them. However, it was fairly tame stuff, and it was not helped by Marge's reign feeling pointless. I mean, the whole point was that she could not accomplish anything. And I assume with the ending here, things are just going to go back to normal, and Marge is not going to remain as mayor. I say I assume because this ending was kind of rushed, so they had to shoehorn in a future scene showing Quimby taking a job back from Marge, even though he was perfectly fine retired a few scenes before. So yeah, this was a disappointing one, because it started okay, and had the potential to be better. Season 29, Episode 7, Singin in the Lane. Homer and the guys reunite their old bowling team to cheer up Moe, only to end up in fierce competition with a team of arrogant millionaires. Meanwhile, Lisa and Marge tried to teach Bart that money isn't everything. My trivia for this one is that Bart appears wearing the same suit he had in Bart the Murderer, and my best moment was just seeing the old bowling teams compete again. This one gets a 2 out of 5. This not only called back to the episode Team Homer by reviving the Pin Pals, it also played out a bit like that episode. We see Homer and his friends take on a variety of teams before some dissension in the ranks rears its head. The only problem is, this did not have the jokes to carry the simple story like Team Homer did. And they also tacked on a pointless subplot here. Bart and Lisa, with the arrogant rich folks, never had anything going for it, and had no jokes along the way. It was only there to fill up time. The main plot was not much better, as we have the stereotypical depressed Moe, whose motivations get a bit confusing by the end. Team Homer itself is a very gag-centric episode, so if we're going to do a follow-up on it, the follow-up also needs to be quite gag-heavy to work. This was not funny at all though, so it just ended up being an inferior episode in every way. Season 29, Episode 8, Mr. Lisa's Opus. As future Lisa writes her college application essay for Harvard, she recalls past disappointing birthdays that helped shape who she is. My trivia for this one is that the name of this episode is a reference to the drama film Mr. Holland's Opus. And my best moment was Ned convincing Homer to quit drinking. This one gets a 3 out of 5. That did keep me interested, but that's about all. Just because it's a future episode with some sweet moments, it doesn't mean that I automatically consider it a classic. In fact, this episode does not actually have anything new to tell us about Lisa. We already know that she ends up going to college, and the bit about her family forgetting her birthday never added much either. Redoing the Lisa It's Your Birthday song was alright I guess, but even that went on for too long. As I said though, there were some good bits. Some of the scenes with Homer and baby Lisa were cute, and the scene where future Ned gets Homer to quit alcohol was quite funny. Homer had a point. If he is powerless, surely that means everyone is a higher power than him. I guess this episode also confirms that Lisa had a girlfriend in college. I don't mind that all too much, because her being bisexual has been hinted at a few times in the show before, so it doesn't come across as jarring. The only time I have a problem with this stuff is when they try to force it on an established character out of the blue. Then it just comes across as a writer's retconning for the sake of diversity. This is an example of them doing it in a slightly more believable way. But back to the review. As I said, it was an average episode in the end. The jokes once again being the main thing which let it down. Season 29, Episode 9, Gone Boy. Bart falls into an underground missile silo, leading the town to put together a search party to find him. However, Sideshow Bob manipulates Milhouse into revealing where Bart is hiding. My trivia for this one is that the live-action video of President John F. Kennedy is from his 1961 presidential inauguration speech. And my best moment was Bart's prank call to Moe. This one gets a 4 out of 5. I liked how this episode got straight into setting things up by showing us Sideshow Bob out doing his prison duties, and later Bart getting trapped in this old secret government room. It's all quite interesting stuff, and set up for an eventful ending. The bits of the town all looking for Bart were maybe dragged out a bit too much though, and I think it could have all been solved if Milhouse did not sell Bart out just to get a few hugs from Lisa. The ending, of course, ended up with Bob letting Bart go, which is to be expected at this point. His muddled motivations are almost becoming a joke on the show at this point. It's not that bad, but it does remove any actual suspense these episodes could have. Gone are the days of Cape Fear, where Bob could be simultaneously funny and threatening. The comedy here, though, was actually good, which is a rare thing indeed for this season. Bart's prank call here to Moe was one of the better ones ever in my opinion, and Homer's remark about Abe dying in a nursing home while burning away all of his savings, that is definitely in a sad but true category. Even Bart doing impressions of his family members was decent. I do have to point out the overuse of the Wilhelm scream though. I have counted at least 3 or 4 uses of that scream already in this season, and it has very much worn out its welcome by now. Still though, this was an interesting episode, and a worthwhile addition to the Sideshow Bob collection. Season 29, Episode 10, Haw-Haw Land. After Lisa falls for a jazz pianist named Brendan, Nelson becomes jealous and tries to win Lisa over instead. Meanwhile, Bart discovers that he has an affinity for chemistry. My trivia for this one is that Martin Prince is seen reading Mama's Boy's Life, and that's a reference to the Boy Scout magazine Boy's Life. And the best moment here was the ending. This one got a 2 out of 5 from me. This was very much HD Simpsons on autopilot. Despite Ed Sheeran voicing him, Brendan was an extremely dull character with no memorable traits, so I did not care for his potential relationship with Lisa. It all comes to nothing in the end anyway. Same with Nelson, whose on and off infatuation with Lisa has started to get a bit old now in my opinion. I did enjoy the subplot of Bart learning chemistry a bit more. Sure, it may be a bit unrealistic how he got his hands on all those chemicals, but it was fun to see him experiment with something new. The ending where he does actually show competence, but at the same time pranks the school anyway, that fits him quite well. The jokes though had more misses than hits, which is why this gets a 2. I did like the one where Wiggum lets Homer up the treehouse because of his fat guy courtesy. However, the eye thing was just weird. And the Flanders thumbs up was a rare example of a Flanders gag failing. Season 29, Episode 11, Frink gets testy. Professor Frink comes up with a new way of testing the citizens of Springfield. The results shake the Simpson family to their core. My trivia for this one is that the Orson Welles documentary of Nostradamus is a parody of the late great planet Earth, and my best moment was the song Fake Out. This one got a 2 out of 5. This episode felt rather pointless, to be honest. Frink's quiz was portrayed as a farce from the get-go, and it was confirmed as such by the ending where he randomly fudges the results. So because of that, the entire town taking the thing so seriously felt a bit weird, and made some of the characters look like idiots, frankly. Especially Lisa and Marge. Now I know Lisa often gets stressed over tests, but I never really liked that part of her personality anyway. I have never really given much of a toss about tests in real life, to be honest with ya. So I just get kind of irritated when people act like it's the be all and end all, even in cartoons. The plot also did Bart no favours. Sure, they did reverse calling him a loser, but why even have that part in the episode? The show is really struggling to know what to do with Bart at the minute, which is a shame. I was considering giving this a 1, but there were a few decent things here which keep it at a 2. One is a song starting playing like it's a part of a scene, only for it to be revealed that Lisa is listening to an old radio station. The other is Homer commenting that Marge is as beautiful as her sisters are hideous. Marge's impressed reaction to that makes it work. Season 29, Episode 12. Homer is where the art isn't. Homer is accused of stealing a multi-million-dollar painting. Only a detective from the 1970s can clear his name. So the title here is a reference to the song Home is Where the Heart Is. And my best moment was Homer's incompetence at lying while being interrogated by Manichek. I gave this one a 3 out of 5. This took a while to get going, but it did at least build to something, and had a few nice moments along the way. It also had its fair share of flaws though, so this was an up and down episode for sure. Obviously it was created as a parody of an obscure 70s crime drama called Manichek. It took a little too long establishing the Manichek character in my opinion, and the jokes of him hitting on women got a bit stale. That being said, he does have some good moments here, like his interactions with Homer. He really brought out the max level of stupidity in him. The actual mystery itself was decent. It was interesting to watch unfold, but it was never portrayed in a particularly serious way. So because of that, the ridiculous explanations at the end were a bit easier to buy. However, there was one big flaw in the ending. Both the rich lady and Burns got arrested for stealing the picture, which turned out to be a fake. But when Lisa admitted to stealing the actual picture, they completely let her off. That was kind of dumb, let's be honest. I understand the whole thing is kind of presented as a farce, but that's not enough to make me completely look past that ending. Back to the positives though. I did like the joke about how 1/3 of the police force was laid off, which in reality was just Eddie. And I also like the references to real life art. I am not a fan of abstract modern art myself. I understand that all art is subjective to some degree, and you can apply any meaning you want to it. However, I prefer art that you look at straight away and go, wow, I could never do anything like that. That must have taken some serious talent. That to me is a type of art that is worthy of such praise. That is why I like the reference to the picture Nighthawks by Edward Hopper. Overall, as I said, this episode was filled with good and bad stuff, but I did have quite a lot to say about it, and that is a good indication that I found it fairly interesting overall. Season 29, Episode 13, 3 scenes plus a tag from a marriage. While visiting their old apartment in Capital City, Homer and Marge recount their transition from a life without kids to a life with them. So this episode's title is a reference to the 1973 Swedish television miniseries Scenes from a Marriage, and my best moment was Bart wreaking havoc as a child. I gave this one a 2 out of 5. As far as flashbacks go, this one was pretty uneventful. For a start, the idea that Homer and Marge would start telling their whole life story to these two random people is a bit silly, and I never cared about the relationship between those two randos. This episode tried to convey the changes to Homer and Marge's life with the coming of Bart and Lisa. However, the same continuity issues that plague a lot of these flashbacks reared its ugly head again. It is hard to get behind new revelations about their past when it contradicts well-held knowledge that we as fans have of the show. You could just say forget about the continuity and treat it as a standalone episode, but realistically that is just hard to do. And when it comes to old episodes like I Married Marge, I don't think the fans should be expected to do that. Anyway, I did like a few moments at least, mainly Bart being mischievous as a kid. He doesn't get to do much on the show nowadays, so he might as well show off in a flashback. The jokes were pretty poor though. I'm assembling a team of the best assemblers was the only one I found even remotely decent. Season 29, Episode 14, Fears of a Clown. After getting pranked himself, Bart gets his revenge. However, his prank ends up destroying Krusty's career. My trivia for this one is that one of the clowns scaring bystanders after Bart's prank is a version of Pennywise the Clown from Stephen King's It, and my best moment was Skinner pranking Bart. I gave this episode a 2 out of 5. Well, I have been saying that Bart has been getting left out recently, so I was hopeful when it started out with him and Skinner pranking each other. That was fun, and it built a simple platform for the episode to build on. However, they never made any use of it. For a start, they kept recycling the boys will be boys line from about 15 seasons ago. And then Bart goes to therapy where he supposedly learns empathy by not letting Marge sit on tax. That was also kind of a rip-off of what we have seen before. And once again, we already know that Bart has empathy, so why do they keep trying to hammer this point in? The ending was also incredibly underwhelming. They tried to build up this dynamic between Bart and Marge, where she wants him to lose his mischievous ways, so much so that she actually recommends that the judge gives him a punishment. That was an interesting thing for her to do, and it should have led to some decent character moments. However, that train of thought was completely abandoned. We learn that Bart did actually prank everyone anyway, so everyone gets hit with water balloons and that's it. Bart and Marge don't even interact again after that incident, so I'm not sure what the point to it all was. It certainly wasn't to develop these characters. All listed was confirmed to me that the writers just can't come up with a good Bart story at the moment. The Krusty subplot was just as pointless. Again, it felt so stale, and brought nothing funny to the table. I am kind of struggling to even review episodes like this. It feels like I'm saying the same thing over and over again. Season 29, Episode 15, No Good Read Goes Unpunished. After a trip to the bookstore, Marge gets inspired to rewrite a book. Meanwhile, Bart reads The Art of War and decides to put it to use against Homer. My trivia for this one is that the Itchy and Scratchy show had a marathon with the hashtag Every Slaughter Ever. This is a reference to marathons of The Simpsons, which have the hashtag Every Episode Ever. And the best bit about the episode for me was Bart using the Art of War on Homer. Right, so I gave this episode a 2 out of 5. This episode is mostly notable for the Apu thing, which I will touch on in a sec. The actual content here was pretty mediocre. The main plot of Marge rewriting a book to be unoffensive doesn't sound particularly entertaining, and it certainly wasn't in practice. The subplot works a bit better. It was fun to see Bart embrace the art of war. It does indeed seem like something he would take on board. It's also nice that Homer himself reads the book, well, the first 5 pages of it anyway, and gets back at Bart. In a strange way, the two end up bonding over the book, which was nice to see. Again though, the jokes were majorly lacking in this one, which along with the Marge storyline holds it back. So onto the elephant in the living room. This episode's response to the Apu controversy. A brief warning, if you don't care about my opinion on this, please skip to the next episode timestamp. I wouldn't blame you at all if you do that, as I don't like getting too political or controversial in these reviews, and I certainly don't want to force my opinions on you. That would make me no better than the people I criticize. However, given how much this ended up affecting the show, I'm kind of forced into addressing it. For anyone who doesn't know the controversy, It centers around a 2017 documentary called The Problem with Apu by Harry Condobolo. The gist of it is that Apu is a racist stereotype and a caricature, and as a result is harmful to the Indian American community. The documentary also alleges that there has been a lot of hate and bullying because of the character. And I'm sure there has been some idiots who have used Apu as an excuse to be horrible or racist people. However, I suspect that those people were always going to be like that, and if Apu never existed, they would just use another excuse to act that way. If you are experiencing that, the way to deal with those people is to not let their words affect you. I mean, let's put things into perspective. We are all here on Earth for a limited time, right? Why waste that precious time letting the words of idiots get you down? And I understand that some people have thicker skin than others, but I'm just giving you my perspective. What does banning cartoon characters actually achieve? I would argue very little. And I'm even including actual racist characters in that, like from the old Looney Tunes for example. The irony, of course, is that Apu is nowhere near on that level. Sure, he is a stereotype to some extent, but so are 90% of Simpsons characters. But Apu by no means has the most negative portrayal amongst the Simpsons cast. In fact, he has a fair few positive traits. He is a very hard worker who, when push comes to shove, will stand up for his friends. He is also a very iconic and funny character, who millions of fans have loved for nearly 30 years, including a lot of Indian American fans by the way. So yeah, I personally think that it's kind of a non-issue. And as such, the show's response here didn't bother me. I know some people have a problem with it, saying they should have been more sincere, but I honestly feel like they addressed it with the level of seriousness it deserves. I actually even agree with the show. I mean, what can they even do at this point? Clearly though, Hank Azaria did not agree with me, as he stepped down from the role of Apu, and eventually Carl as well. And of course that's his decision. He can voice or not voice whoever he wants at the end of the day. I just don't agree with his decision. Let me explain why. In my opinion, the beauty of voice acting is that you can be something that you're not. I have no problem with a white person voicing a black character, a black person voicing a white character, or any other combination you can think of. As long as they can do a good job, then I don't see the issue. I do understand the counter-argument to that. It's that people from the same background as a character are more likely to be able to relate to the backgrounds and experiences of said character. And for certain characters there may well be some truth to that, but that's only if you're creating a new character and know what you're looking for. In the case of Apu though, I would simply say, why fix what isn't broken? And the fact that he has been a popular cartoon character for 30 years is evidence enough to me that it wasn't broken. So yeah, sorry for making this episode review, probably the longest of all of them, but I hope you can appreciate that this needed addressing. If for any reason you want to discuss this further, be sure to leave a comment, and I will gladly talk to you about it, whether you agree with me or disagree. I am open to having a chat, as long as it's done respectfully. Anyway, on to the next episode. Season 29, Episode 16, King Leer. Homer and Marge find out that Moe is having a fight with his estranged father Morty, so they try to reconnect the pair. So in this episode, Moe says he'll go to the mattresses with his siblings, and that is a reference to a mob saying. It became popular thanks to the movie The Godfather and the TV series The Sopranos, and my best moment was the ending. I gave this one a 4 out of 5. Like a few episodes this season, this one was kind of floating in the middle of two ratings. It was a high 3 or a low 4, but in this case I decided to be generous and give it a 4. It had been a while since we got a Moe episode, so I was glad to get one again. This one does a good job at touching on his childhood. We haven't learnt that much about that period of his life, as of yet, so it was nice to change that. His family also were somewhat interesting. They all managed to show off some personality and played off Moe well. The guest stars all did a good job, especially Ray Liotta as Moe's dad. You would expect Moe's family to be morally bankrupt, and these lot absolutely were. Not even because they betrayed Moe, simply because they were the worst thing you can possibly be, mattress salesmen. The ending I liked because it brought back the roaches from Moe's past, and Moe was actually able to be the morally right person for a change. The jokes here were actually alright. None were amazing, but there were a lot of smile-worthy ones. The drunken dog was my favourite. The only thing I didn't like so much was the opening scenes with Bart getting an instrument, especially the bit about Marge imagining Bart causing harm with them. They really need to cut down on these jokes about Bart being this horrible kid. It's like the writers think he is worse than he actually is, so they feel the need to keep projecting that onto us. That small thing aside though, I still enjoyed watching this. Season 29, Episode 17, Lisa Gets the Blues. Lisa gets discouraged after Mr. Largo tells her that she will never make it big as a musician. To cheer her up, the family go on a trip to Jazz Fest in New Orleans. My trivia for this one is that in the opening credits, the title of The Flintstones was shown instead of The Simpsons. And my best moment was Maggie being disgusted by Milhouse. I gave this one a 3 out of 5. The idea of Lisa getting the yips and being physically unable to play the sax was interesting. Obviously that would be a traumatic thing to happen, and it would have been interesting to find out how she dealt with it. However, I feel it would have had more initial impact in the context of the episode if we hadn't just seen Lisa try and give away the sax because she got some bad advice from her teacher. I think it would have worked better if she rejected the advice straight away and instead was determined to prove them wrong, only then to find out that subconsciously it had affected her and she was unable to play. That would have given her emotional struggle more weight in my opinion, but I guess I'm just an idiot. Once they got to New Orleans, things kind of drifted by without a point until the ending. They showed off some of the city, but I did not get many of the references. Obviously they referenced that Louis Armstrong was born there, which was something I knew about. The only other kind of obscure fact I know about New Orleans is that the famous chess player Paul Morphy from the 1800s was from there. So there you go, that is my weird fact of the day. Bonus points to anyone here who knew that. Now onto the ending. It was a fairly quick way to resolve things, and Bleeding Gums Murphy's nephew randomly seeing Lisa on the street was very coincidental. That being said, he was cool enough, so it's not the worst thing ever. Comedy-wise, this was okay, Maggie being horrified at the prospect of being set up with Milhouse, and a few bits of Homer eating the food was decent. Season 29, Episode 18, Forgive and Regret. Abe confesses to Homer about a horrible thing he did after Mona left. After initially forgiving him, Homer realizes that he can't let it go. So my trivia for this one is that with this episode, The Simpsons officially surpassed Gunsmoke as the longest running primetime television series. And my best moment was the moment between Homer and Abe on the cliff. I gave this one a 4 out of 5. The intro here was good, with how the banter at Moe's got to Homer, which led to him having to give up his car to a demolition derby participant. There was some fun to be had with all that silliness, even if it perhaps went on a little too long. The actual main story here turned out to be another flashback about Abe, Mona, and Homer. It had a simple and solid enough premise, although it did contradict the episode Mother Simpson, about what Abe said to Homer about Mona after she left. But the show has done so many episodes about this particular part of the timeline that I suppose some minor contradictions are inevitable. Abe throwing the recipe box away was a mean thing for him to do, given that he knew what it meant to Homer. But as we know, the show has always swayed quite heavily on how sympathetic Abe is portrayed, so it is what it is. The conclusion all made up for it though. As I said, the moment where Homer fully puts his anger aside and forgives Abe because, to quote him, "Mum left, but you were always there," is great because it's simply true. Abe never left Homer, and as we have seen in numerous episodes, he did sacrifice a lot for him, so even when he was not the best parent in the world, it was clear that he did love Homer deep down. The bit about Homer getting the recipes back and tasting his mum's pies again was also a sweet one, both for him and the viewer. As far as the jokes go here, they were reasonably strong. I like the noise blocking glass that Homer has in the car and Hibbert has in the hospital, as well as the box of hospital cotton balls costing $75,000. I didn't care for either of the songs, but that's a minor concern, when most of the rest was enjoyable. Season 29, Episode 19, Left Behind. Ned is forced to close down the Leftorium and is now out of a job. After trying and failing at the power plant, he eventually becomes Bart's new teacher. My trivia for this one is that the song Homer and Ned listen to is an edited version of I Love Rock and Roll by Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. And my best moment was Ned Flanders making Homer his hot chocolate from the movie. This one gets a 4 out of 5. This makes it back to back 4 out of 5s. I'm genuinely impressed. This season seems to be ending a bit stronger. Now this episode is not going to blow you away or anything, but it was fairly solid in everything it tried. Even though it jumped around a bit from the Homer and Marge stuff at the start, to Ned losing the Leftorium and getting a job at the plant, then finally getting a job as Bart's new teacher, with a guilty Bart's help of course. I enjoyed seeing Ned trying to navigate his way through all of these different positions, and even though Homer and Bart were a bit mean to him, it was nice to see them all make up in the end. The reference to Edna was quite nice, and having Ned become Bart's new teacher was an interesting development. I don't know whether he actually stays in that role next season or not, but I do know that they brought in a permanent replacement in season 33, so clearly he does not stay in a role forever. I hesitate to call it a subplot, because it was only a few scenes really, but the bits with Todd and Lisa were nice. It's just good for him to actually make a new friend outside of his brother, even if Lisa was a bit reluctant about it. As far as the moments I liked here, it was cool to see Flanders bring back his hot cocoa from the movie. I also liked the Duff blimp being on fire, and the gag about Maggie being Bart's designated driver. All in all, an enjoyable episode, much like the last one. Season 29, Episode 20, Throw Grandpa from the Dane. In need of an operation, Grandpa and the family go to Denmark, so that he can benefit from the country's free healthcare. So this episode's title is a reference to the 1987 film Throw Mama from the Train. And the best thing about the episode for me was the big apartment cat. This episode gets a 2 out of 5. This was another travel episode, very much in the mold of the Boston one from last season. The family take a trip somewhere, explore the place for a bit, only for Marge and the kids to decide that they want to stay. Now that's a hard pill to swallow once, given that we know they obviously won't end up staying, but they are really pushing their luck, trying it for a second time. None of the character stuff felt convincing. Abe removing this tattoo about Mona meant nothing, and the whole conflict Homer had with Marge about living there was solved by the toilets and washers being too small. Just incredibly flimsy reasoning. The way this plays out almost feels like an advertisement for Danish tourism. This episode makes Denmark out to be a paradise full of rainbows where everything is perfect. Now I'm sure there are parts of Denmark which are great, and some of their socialized systems are good, don't get me wrong, and in the context of that country they work well, but you have to be a bit more subtle about pointing it out than this. This was also not that funny, with gags like Bart and Lisa singing the national anthem going on for far too long. I did at least like some of the animation of the city, and the big apartment cat was nice. I would have totally been stroking that guy too. Season 29, Episode 21, Flanders Ladder. After getting struck by lightning, Bart is in a coma and receives visits from ghosts. So my trivia for this one is that Olivia Newton-John's music video, Let's Get Physical, is one of the tapes Homer watches with the kids. And it's actually the second time that song has been featured on the show. The other one was Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man's wedding, of course. And the best thing about the episode for me was just the general atmosphere that it had. Does the season end strong? I think it does end fairly strong. I gave the finale a 4 out of 5. Don't get me wrong, it was not a perfect episode by any means, but I was just glad they tried to take it in a different direction. The tone of it felt more like a Treehouse of Horror, but no, this was a normal episode. I like how it started out, with the internet being knocked out in a storm. The things the family do to try and pass the time is very on point. And it's kind of true, how a lot of us are overly reliant on the internet nowadays. Now the bit of Bart being hit by lightning was pretty dark. He is in a coma after all, and Homer and Marge don't seem quite as concerned as they probably should be. And the way it is presented is like Lisa could potentially be killing her brother by filling his dreams full of ghosts. You can't even blame her though, really. She didn't know that after all. She thought she was just getting a bit of harmless revenge for a prank Bart played on her earlier in the episode. The scenes in Bart's nightmare were interesting. Seeing all the old characters back as ghosts was a nice touch, and there was some good imagery and animation to keep it all flowing nicely. The ending was a bit abrupt, but the montage before the credits showing how all the characters died in a comedic way was decent. It was the jokes which really helped it up to a 4. I liked Homer doing a Tracy Ullman voice, and seeing the ghost of Sherry Bobbins again, wanting revenge against jet engines, that was pretty funny. And Maud Flanders herself had a few good lines. This was a nice way to end the season. So that is season 29 done, and here is the season summary. As you can see, the overall average score was 2.71, which is up from last season, but I'll discuss it more in detail in a second. My bottom 5 episodes were as follows: Throw Grandpa from the Dane at 5, No Good Read Goes Unpunished at 4, Fears of a Clown at 3, Frink Gets Testy at 2, and Grampy Can You Hear Me was the only one out of 5 this year. And the top 5 fits very neatly because there were 5 4-rated episodes. King Leer was at 5, Left Behind at 4, Flanders Ladder at 3, Gone Boy at 2, and Forgive and Regret as the best of the year. So, as far as this season goes, This is the most uneventful and uninteresting season of The Simpsons, maybe ever. I mean, there was no 5 out of 5s, and only 1 out of 5. There was almost no extremes here. Almost all the ratings were in the middle. And by in the middle, I mean mostly 2s and 3s. That's just not something you would go out of your way to watch, is it? But at the same time, it was not horrific. What I really mean when I say this was uneventful though, is that a lot of the plot points were recycled, and there were not many creative things tried. Flanders Ladder was about it, really. I really can't say anything else about the content of this season. It may not have been the worst season ever, but boy was it one of the most forgettable. As for the characters, I already said that I was not a big fan of Bart's portrayals. In episodes not centered around him, he may as well not be there, and in episodes where he is at the forefront, they struggle to write him well. It is strange, they keep going on about how bad he is, but at the same time, he actually seems a shadow of his former self. I can't get my head around it, to be honest. Not much else to report on the characters. There was a pretty even spread of the secondary ones, with Moe, Ned and Grandpa all getting at least one spotlight episode in. So yeah, that's about all for this one, guys. My motivation for this series may be slowing down a touch, but no way am I stopping now. I'm only 4 seasons away from being caught up after all. If you don't want to miss those future seasons, be sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video if you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching and take care.